Let's talk everything Hedera Hashgraph. So, Chris, we are joined by a special guest today, Christian, over from Hedera Hashgraph. We've got quite a few questions. We're going to jump into that and talk everything Hedera Hashgraph. So, guys, if you find this useful and informative, don't forget to hit that like button. We both really do appreciate it. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed, do go ahead and subscribe. You'll be kept up to date with all of the videos and live streams that we do here at Cheeky Crypto, including Hedera Hashgraph. Right, with that said, Chris, let's jump on over and welcome Christian over to the channel. Hi, Christian, and welcome to Cheeky Crypto. It's great to have you on the show. And, we have lots of viewers who have constantly been asking us to look at Hedera Hashgraph more and more. And we thought there was no better way to connect with yourself and bring you on your show to go through the fantastic project that is Hedera Hashgraph. But Chris, shall we kickstart everything with, a brief introduction and, maybe tell us what you do at Hedera and, how did you get into the space?
Yes, great. So thank you so much for having me on, both of you today. Delighted to be here. And thank you for taking the time to educate your audience about what is a different project from others in the space. So I've actually been at Hedera since before it was Hedera. I came on board, I had a marketing consulting company. So back in late 2018, the founders which we'll talk about in a minute, the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. They were thinking of doing a public ledger based on that Hashgraph consensus algorithm. So I came on board to help with messaging, positioning, and actually launch the project. And then I was going to go on my merry way back to my consulting company. But after the launch, which was in March 2018, so that's 3 years ago now, it's crazy to think, they were fairly persuasive and managed to persuade me to stay full time. And I'm glad I did. It's been an amazing ride. We're so early on in this journey as well that, it's an incredibly exciting space to be in overall. And then at Hedera, I'm very excited for our future as well.
Fantastic. So how did you get into the space? Was it something you've always been interested in, or was it just by coincidence you happened to stumble upon into it?
Yeah, so all of my technology career, I've been in the enterprise software space, especially around databases. And prior to starting up my own consulting company, I had been at a company called DataStax, which commercialized this distributed database that had been open sourced by Facebook. So open source and distributed systems was a sort of good background for me and a passion of mine. And if you think of distributed ledger technology as almost an evolution of that, it made a lot of sense. So some other folks who I had worked with early on were also helping out with Hashgraph, and they were like, I think we need you over here, so come on over. So it was a happy accident. I can't say that I was following the space. A guy at my previous job, he started mining Bitcoin in so early, like 2010, 2011. And I remember he would just talk about how exciting it was and we had to get into it. And I was fairly dismissive of him at the time. I wish I hadn't been, because he's done pretty well. But so it was a happy accident sort of getting into the space. And yeah, I'm really glad I did.
Fantastic.
Super. So I guess the viewers have sent in quite a few questions and we kind of narrowed it down. So I guess the first question was what is 𝗕𝗄𝗪 or Hedera Hashgraph? Maybe sort of like an easy to follow explanation of what Hedera is, since it isn't really a blockchain as such.
Correct. It is not a blockchain. So let's separate. 𝗕𝗄𝗪 is the cryptocurrency and we'll talk about that, sort of separately. Hedera Hashgraph is a public ledger network, so a decentralized network that is built on the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, which, as you just noted, Chris, is not a blockchain. So Dr. 𝗕𝗓𝗪𝗏𝗏, who is the inventor of the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, he did not set out to build a better blockchain. He set out to solve a very old math problem, which is how can you have a truly distributed system come to consensus on the validity and order of transactions while not sacrificing security. And for years, he started working on it in 2012, and for years he persuaded himself that it just wasn't possible. You would have to sacrifice, either performance or security, but you couldn't have both. But then in 2015, he had this big breakthrough that led to Hashgraph, which is this very efficient way to come to consensus and also maintains the highest form of security, which is something called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. And this is the property of Hashgraph itself. And then Hedera is a public network built on that technology that exposes services. So we have a couple of services. One is a consensus service, and the other is a token service, which allows developers to build really interesting applications. And I'm happy to go into some use cases. And these applications inherit the properties of Hashgraph, so they're able to be very, very high throughput, very, very low latency, and extremely secure at the same time. So in a nutshell, that's sort of Hedera and Hashgraph, different from blockchain. And then 𝗕𝗓𝗪 is we're a proof of stake network. So 𝗕𝗓𝗪 is the scarce resource, it's the cryptocurrency. So it has two purposes. One is it is the clean fuel for the network. So if you are a developer and you're building on the network, every API call you make to a service, you pay a tiny, tiny fraction of a penny in 𝗕𝗓𝗪. And then being a proof of stake network, it's also the mechanism when we move to, through the phases of adding more and more nodes into the network, it's actually the scarce resource that will protect the integrity and safety of the network itself. So that is 𝗕𝗓𝗪.
Super. And you touched on use cases. Could we sort of go into a bit of detail on those?
Yeah, so what sets Hedera apart is its ability to process thousands of transactions per second with fast finality. So if you go to a shop and you swipe your Visa card, or chip and pin in England, so you don't even swipe it, you just tap it, it's taking probably 7 to 9 seconds for that transaction to be received by the Visa network and actually reach finality, which is where that transaction is committed, your funds are debited, and you know that it's gone through. So with Hedera, you can do this in a distributed, decentralized manner with tens of thousands of transactions per second and with finality in about 3 to 5 seconds. So it allows for a host of use cases that are just not possible on traditional blockchain platforms. So for example, in the UK right now, being used by a group of National Health Service hospitals, they are taking sensor readings from the freezers, which have to store the Pfizer and Moderna COVID vaccines. And they take these readings and they hash those readings onto Hedera so that they cannot be changed. So anyone can come and see that those timestamps of you know, it happened at this time, it was at this temperature, we know the vaccine was not compromised in any way. Or if the temperature of the freezer goes down, oh, we do know it was compromised, and we do know it was compromised at this time. Before this technology, a nurse once an hour would have to check out of what they're doing, helping patients, walk to the freezer, read the temperature off the freezer, and manually enter it. So these are the types of things that just become possible when you have, you know, really high throughput, really fast finality, and very, very cheap cost for each transaction itself. And there are some other, you know, very interesting applications that we're looking at. So there's a company, Hala Systems, that has an early warning system set up in Syria to warn of air strikes in Syria.
Sure.
And there are people and sensors on the ground that are sending information to Hedera. And again, they're logging that on the public ledger, so that, and they have some very advanced algorithms, so you know that the data is very authentic. It streams straight from the devices itself. So again, if you were to try to do these types of things in a traditional blockchain, you just couldn't do them.
That's
Sure.
good. That's good. Yeah,
that sounds good.
So let's talk a little bit about the tech maybe, and you know, what do you think about the possible dominance versus blockchain in the future? Do you think you know, ultimately the DAG approach is going to outperform you know, blockchain technology in the future?
So I am biased, and therefore, you know, you shouldn't expect me to say anything other than yes. I do think the Hashgraph technology is groundbreaking. You mentioned DAG, and DAG is a very confusing term for people because unlike blockchain itself, all blockchains kind of work the same, but different DAGs, and that stands for a directed acyclic graph. They all work a bit differently, so you can't really compare those themselves. And a directed acyclic graph is just a way of sort of visualizing the data structure itself. So IOTA with Tangle, it is a DAG, is very different from Hedera with Hashgraph, that is also a DAG. So it's tough to say, will DAGs beat blockchain? I tend to think that we've had these different eras of blockchain technology. So Bitcoin came along and it said, you can now do money without a central bank. You can do money in a decentralized system, and we all kind of agree that your account balance is this, your account balance is this. We can, you know, peer-to-peer cash. That's all great. I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere. That use case is entrenched. You know, it has a ton of value. Next came Ethereum, and Ethereum said, okay, if you have money and I have something, then you give me your money and I'll give you my something, and we'll figure out exactly how to do that. And that was smart contracts. So both that first generation with Bitcoin and then Ethereum, they are, you know, slow and costly. So that's going to consign them to certain high value use cases. But those two use cases I just mentioned that we have running on Hedera, you would never do those on them. The economics just don't make sense, and exactly. The time to wait for consensus don't make sense. So if you need to do something like a fair market, so let's say we want to do decentralized Uber or Deliveroo, or, you know, one of these sharing economy type services without the middleman, then doing that on the Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum blockchain is pretty hard to do. So that's where systems like Hedera are really going to come to the fore. But we've talked a ton about technology, and our technology is fantastic. I'm very excited about it. But why I think we will win overall is we have a very unique governance model as well. How do we govern the code base and ensure that the network won't fork, that it's stable, that it's trustworthy, that it is decentralized today and can become even more decentralized in the future, versus maybe other systems which start really decentralized and actually become more centralized over time because people, they collude, they pool their mining resources. So our founders spent a lot of time also solving for truly decentralized governance. So we are currently governed by 19 really large global organizations. They are in different vertical industries, they're in different geographies, and they are term limited. They can only serve as a governing council members for 2 3-year terms. So they can't amass power and consolidate that power over time. And we'll grow that council to 39 members. So when you attract these large enterprises into your governing council, they're also looking at building on the network itself. They have use cases, they're deploying those use cases. And as goes, and I know this isn't a purist view, by the way, and I have a ton of empathy for the purist, no question. Happy to talk about that. But if you have large enterprises making technology decisions and saying this is the system we're building on, the market tends to move with those as well. And sure, again, we can talk about the purists and how that's a little different.
It does tend to split opinion, doesn't it?
Yes.
It definitely does. Like I'm kind of the viewpoint that there's going to be many winners, regardless of whether it's Hedera or I don't know, say Cardano, for example, or even Ethereum, right? I think there's enough space for everybody. That's kind of my view on things. But
I share that view. I don't know who the winners will be. I do believe we'll be one of the winners, but the loser should be the status quo, the centralized systems today. Going back to that sharing economy, why should you give 30% of your hard-earned wages to a central intermediary? That's all they're doing is providing that service. Like if they did that at 1%, you'd be like, okay, no problem. So, that's who I hope is the loser, and I suspect they will be over time.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So Chris, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, so I guess I don't know if this is partly answered already, but of all the different DAG protocols, what sets sort of 𝗕𝗄𝗪 apart from the rest? And I guess what makes Hedera the better choice?
Yeah, so I would say some technical superiority around both the throughput, latency, and security. So a system that is resilient to distributed denial of service attacks and 𝗕𝗘𝗪 attacks is very important. And then also having this stable governance, I would say those are the 2 things that really set us apart versus other, systems in the market. And, if you are a purist, you literally have hundreds of choices, but, there's only one hash graph consensus algorithm, and there's only one Hedera, and therefore you've got something that looks very different in the market. And to your point, Chris, maybe there'll be many winners, but I suspect that for those sort of mission critical enterprise based decentralized application use cases, that that's where we're going to carve out that big niche for ourselves.
Okay, fantastic. So the next question that has kind of been fed into us from the audience is why is there no maximum supply, and why did 𝗕𝗪𝗪 choose to release so many coins in circulating supply, rather than starting with a smaller supply to start with? And do you want to kind of cover that, because there's some good answers to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. So if you go to CoinMarketCap and you look at the max supply, it is blank for Hedera, and it should not be. So I understand why you get this question, and it's a little frustrating. So CoinMarketCap, if you're listening, you know, let's
sort it out.
Because CoinGecko, for example, does show max supply. So there are 50 billion HBARs. They were minted in August 2018. There will only ever be 50 billion HBARs. So there'll never be another HBAR other than that. The code prevents it from doing so. So that is hard coded in the system. Now, the governing council could, in theory, say, well, let's change the code and mint more HBARs. But in doing so, there's actually a clause like the license agreement to use Hashgraph prohibits that from happening. So it really is a fixed maximum supply of 50 billion HBARs. It also has a very long release cycle. So, you know, to talk about circulating supply, there are HBARs that are contractually obligated to be released. Those may be for the early investors. They may be for employees and contractors. They may be as a license fee to the IP holder of Hashgraph. And when you see those tokens in the market, that's contractually obligated. Then we have this treasury, which is governed by these large entities, the council itself, and they will decide, you know, how to release those coins from treasury, when to release those coins for treasury, you know, really to build the overall ecosystem for Hedera. And we're just not into that phase yet, but that phase is coming. So, you know, some people say, well, against 50 billion, it's actually very small circulating supply. And others say, well, you released, you know, 7 billion tokens already. That's a lot. So I think it's a little bit, it depends. But over time, as the network itself gets more and more utilized, then you can see that you need HBARs to pay for these API calls, and you need HBARs to secure the network itself. And we're early days. We're only 1.5 years into this journey.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so lots of our viewers really love to stake, and one of the questions that we've had in was, you know, when will proxy staking be available? People love staking.
Yes. So I cannot tell you when it will be available, but our community asks this question all the time. And again, I have a ton of empathy and sympathy, because we are a proof of stake network that currently you can't stake. So we have a video called The Path to Full Decentralization. There's a paper coming on the path to full decentralization. And today in the network itself, the initial governing council members run the nodes in the network. There will come a time, you know, not in the far future, in the sort of foreseeable future, where non-council members will run nodes in the network. And that is where, if you have HBARs, you can stake those coins to a node, and you'll receive a small return on that. As someone running a node or an entity running a node, you will participate in node fees, and your reward will be a lot larger. So to attract more people to stake to your node, to proxy stake to your node, you might, you know, competing with other nodes, you might say, I'll give you a little bit higher return on your HBARs. And then as envisioned on Hedera, our proxy staking model, there's no bonding where you have to lock up your tokens for a period of time. And there's no slashing where you can lose tokens if there's a bad actor at play. So you know, your HBARs are still very portable and liquid, and, you know, So in return for that, because you're not doing a lot of work with those HBARs, the return will be smaller than maybe you see on other proof of stake networks. And then obviously in the future, some of these third-party staking protocols, maybe they will pop up on Hedera, and you'll start to be able to, lend your HBARs for a return and do other things. So the word staking itself has developed lots of different meanings as well.
It's definitely evolved, hasn't it? Yeah. So let's maybe talk a little bit about, what the future might look like. Where do you see, Hedera in the next 5 years?
Yes. So if we talk about the governing council, we're at 19 members today. The number of governing council members at full complement will be 39. So no question over sort of the next year or so, filling out that council. Executing on our path to full decentralization. So first off, opening it up to permissioned KYC nodes, which are know your customer, where and then the phase after that, where it's truly permissionless network. That's the third and final phase. And then so you'll see more and more nodes be added to the network. So that's one on decentralization. Two is we are currently the most utilized network, public network in the market, but we're only doing 75 transactions per second today. Our network capability is throttled to 10,000 transactions per second. And with that Hedera consensus service and Hedera token service, tokenization is here today. It's more and more, every day you're hearing about either NFTs, non-fungible tokens, or fungible tokens being minted. I expect our transaction volumes just to keep scaling and keep scaling until we approximate having 10,000 transactions per second and then needing to scale out our capabilities. My hope is in the next 5 years, we are doing thousands and thousands of transactions per second. And then I think the last thing is, when I talked about enterprise use cases, we're seeing some of the governing council members deploy on the network already. So a large global law firm, DLA Piper, they have a security token platform on Hedera. And I expect that you'll see, because enterprises move slowly, very slowly and methodically, that in the next 5 years, you'll see some very, very interesting actual enterprise use cases starting to be deployed on the network.
Fantastic.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question. Are you invested in any other projects outside of Hedera?
So there are two. So a little bit of Bitcoin, because it's the original. And what Bitcoin did was just groundbreaking, very cool. And then a very good friend of mine works at Ripple. So I have a little bit of Ripple, and she has a little bit of HBAR, and that's just a fun thing to chat about. But as far as really diversifying, I don't feel confident that I know enough about other projects to really feel comfortable. So that isn't to say they're not good. I just know what we're doing at Hedera, and I really understand it, and I get the vision, and I just don't have that level of comfort with some of these other networks.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, they are all of the questions that kind of have been fed into us, Chris. Is there anything else that you can think of?
No, just really appreciate having you on the show, talking everything Hedera. I guess, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you think's sort of worth mentioning for the audience? A lot of people are new in the space, and I think it's great to educate people.
Yeah, so what I would say is any project you look at, really any project, there's a lot of content out there where you can dive deeply and understand for yourself and kind of make your own decision. And we are very fortunate. Hedera.com, if you want to look into those use cases that I talked about, you can go to Hedera.com and you can read all about dozens and dozens of use cases on the network. You can read the license, the agreement that the council members actually sign to become a governing council member. You can read minutes from the meetings of things that they voted on. So I'd say avail yourself of that resource. And then we have a really knowledgeable community on Telegram and on Twitter, and they're so welcoming of new participants. You know, ask questions and they will help you out. So yeah, and I hope people listening today will, you know, take the next step and start to look at the project and see if it's something that, you know, appeals to them.
Yeah, definitely. We're always telling people to go do their research, right? It's so important. So yeah, definitely get on the website and check for all that information. It sounds really transparent, which is fantastic. It's one of the things that we really like.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's you know, transparency is key, and you know, doing your own research as well. You know, we always say you cannot just you know, pay attention to what one or two particular YouTubers or, you know, public figures are talking about. You kind of have to come up with your own, you know, answers, right? And we can give you steers and give you rough directions on where to look for information, but ultimately it's your decision, and you really need to do your own research. So yeah, fantastic advice. But Christian, we really do appreciate you hopping on the show, you know, this evening, and yeah, we'll hopefully do it again sometime in the future. I think 2021 is going to be a fantastic year for many in the space, and Hedera is probably going to be, you know, without a doubt, one of those that definitely does incredibly well. So we'll probably end up having to have another catch up further through the year.
Well, I hope you're right. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'd be delighted to come back anytime you want to have me.
So that was Christian from Hedera Hashgraph. I really appreciate him jumping on the show this evening to kind of talk about everything Hedera Hashgraph. And hopefully, guys, you found this useful and informative. If you did, remember to hit that like button. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed, do go ahead and subscribe. By subscribing, you're going to be kept up to date with all of the videos and live streams that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. It's free, you'll be kept informed, so why not? And with that said, we hope everyone has a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all in the next one.
Yeah, take care.